All
All
right.
right, welcome to OPO Insights, and we're going to start off with the lightning round. I'm here with Erin Wilson from Indiana Donor Network. Erin, what is one thing that OPOs need to stop doing?
I think OPOs need to stop talking. We need to talk less and listen more.
Okay, and then what's one thing that they should start doing then?
Listen, let's just listen to the feelings that people have. Let's just listen to the needs that they have that need to be met in order to collaborate.
And what is one word or phrase you think best represents this work?
Keep showing up. Keep showing up to provide compassion and love for the donors and the hospital staff that help donation happen.
Wonderful. We're going to talk about all of that and more in this episode. How do you deal with conflict when you are encountering it as an organ procurement organization in the hospital? It's not an easy question, and unfortunately, I don't have any easy answers, but you know who might is Erin Wilson. Erin is the manager of hospital services at Indiana Donor Network, and actually, I don't want to say she has easy answers. I want to say she has helpful answers because easy answers are not what we're looking for when it comes to building relationships in the hospital. But having a plan, having a strategy, having a framework in mind is something that you absolutely need to have if you want to go through the process of getting past that conflict and building stronger relationships with the people that you're working with. And Erin is going to tell you how to do that in this great, incredible interview. I hope you enjoy it. Hey everyone, welcome to OPO Insights. I'm Sean Jordan from RPG, and I have with me Erin Wilson from Indiana Donor Network. And Erin, you are the hospital services manager there, and I know you because I had a chance to come and talk to your team last year, and it was an incredible experience. You guys are so passionate about what you do. So thanks for having me then, and thanks for being on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Excited to be here.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how you got into this world of donation. You know, I always say I never expected to have anything to do with this topic. I signed my driver's license when I was 16, and when I started doing research at RPG, we were working for an OPO, and I just kind of fell into it. How about yourself? How did you get into this?
Yeah, by background, I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I have always been in the field of medical social work. And I originally started out with pediatrics at a pediatric hospital, and then also in the adult world of ER medicine. So I loved not knowing what I was getting into, the crisis intervention skills. I just love that. I still do. But over the years, as I get older in the field, I like a more controlled setting. And when I spoke with our now director of family services, she actually brought me into the OPO world. And so far, I've been here for 8 years. I see myself in this field till retirement. But it's been really exciting being in the OPO world as I started out as a family advocate, approaching the families in the hospitals. Did that for about 4 years, and then I switched gears to aftercare services and providing that grief support for the donor families. Did that for 2 years, and now this role for 2 years as the hospital services manager, managing the liaisons that are in the field and in the hospitals, and then our forensic outreach coordinators.
You've really hit on the holy triad of the groups that we talk to in OPO Insights here, which is family services, aftercare, and hospital services. And hey, hopefully some of the forensic folks will be listening too. That'd be great. But these are three really crucial and essential frontline roles that require not just passion and dedication, but also patience and a willingness to get along with people and a willingness to solve problems. And I know that probably when you were starting out in your career, you probably were thinking more about just counseling people one-on-one. So how has that changed as you've gotten into the work that you're doing in the OPO world?
Yeah, I have dabbled a little bit in one-on-one therapy. I did it for
Mm-hmm.
about 2 years prior to the OPO world. And I really miss the interdisciplinary work. I miss being with teams and helping make a whole entire mission happen, not just on an individual level. So
Okay.
moving away from individual therapy with individuals is really where my passion is when I got back to the interdisciplinary work. So that's what I really love. It doesn't take just one person to make donation happen. It takes the organ clinical staff. It takes behind the scenes business analytics. It takes the grief support afterwards. There's just so many roles that make it happen, which is what I love, rather than just the individual work.
It's so true. And, the OPOs that I've seen that function the best are the ones where they have those interdisciplinary teams that there's people often that have been trained in multiple roles and that are able to understand what each other are trying to accomplish and how they support each other, rather than just throwing individuals out there who maybe themselves are good at what they do, but who aren't really able to see the bigger picture of what's going on. And I've certainly seen that too, and it doesn't work as well. So one of the things that you have to do when you're working with a team like a hospital services team is to think about the bigger picture of how do you interact with, say, the family services team or with the aftercare team. So how do you help your team to think about that?
Well, I love that you asked that question because we do have some in-house teams at our larger donation hospitals. So those teams include a family advocate, our hospital liaison, and then a referral response coordinator. So teaching our liaisons how to interact consistently with these other roles is really important. We've done a lot of investment and work on making sure these teams are collaborative. So we want our liaisons and our family advocates and these referral response coordinators that work tightly on a regular basis together to be seen as one for the hospitals. So the hospitals know that these teams can provide consistency for them and they know what to expect. We want our hospitals to know that, okay, I saw the family advocate today. If I give her this information, I know the whole team, the referral response coordinator, the liaison, and vice versa, are going to be up to speed and be able to help us and know where we're at with serving families and pursuing donation.
I love that. And I think that it really requires a lot of behind the scenes work to make that smooth and effective because I've been to OPOs where, and this is not a slam because some of them are really, really large, but I've been to OPOs where the teams don't know each other at all. And it's hard to get them together because they're so busy and they're so spread out, especially in the really broad geographies that some OPOs have. So I think that it takes a lot of behind the scenes effort to even make that happen. And I'm so glad that you guys are doing that in Indiana.
Yeah, but I mean, to speak to that, because we only have two facilities that have that in-house, in-network kind of team. However, the rest of our state is divided up into like territories, and we don't have that core team stationed in the hospital. So what we try to do is communicate within management of all these different teams to break down those silos. We really want to make sure, because we don't see everybody in the organization, we have, a 200 clinical staff that are working together but may not see each other on a regular basis. So as managers, we're very responsible, we take it very seriously to make sure that each team is aware of any changes that are happening within our departments and staffing changes. How many people are we trying to staff this month if we have open positions, making sure we do introductions. We just hired this person, here's her picture, here's her background. So we take that really important in order to break those silos.
I love that. And, silos are one of those kind of buzzwords we hear a lot in the corporate world, but they really do describe something that happens a lot, especially in organ procurement agencies where everybody has these really defined roles and they're all working towards objectives that are important. I mean, you guys are saving lives. You're helping donor families. You're taking care of the hospital partners who a lot of times themselves are, dealing with the trauma and shock of losing a patient. You're trying to make sure recipients get the organs that they need. I mean, you have a lot of different objectives that are super crucial. And so it's understandable why those silos form. And yet, when they form, it kind of creates this problem where maybe some folks feel that their role is the most important. And really, it's got to be part of that whole fabric of what everyone is trying to accomplish. And I love the idea that you're not just engaging that at the frontline level, but also at the managerial level regularly, because I think that that's something that again is not something I see at every OPO that I work with. So in terms of the mission that you all have at Indiana Donor Network. I know when I've been to your facility, you guys have this incredible display when you walk in. It's this massive stories tall tree that has it lights up, and you can go and you can look up a donor and you can see a little bit of a memorial about them. So the mission is really central to you guys in a way that is very visual. But how do you guys think about the mission in terms of how you're engaging with each other? Not all of you have had a donor family experience where you've actually been a donor family, but I know you're all really passionate about trying to keep the donor families at the center of what you're doing.
Yeah, I think, again, it's a group effort, right? I think to keep our internal staff focused on the mission, we do connect to purposes. We try to give those to our teams as much as we can. And that's a team effort. When we get feedback as hospital liaisons from a hospital, hey, that case went really well. We have to share that with the organ team. We have to share that with the family advocate teams. So they hear it and they know it, and they have confidence the next time they go into that hospital, right? That, okay, we do a good job with this. We collaborate well. It also takes efforts from, the organ coordinators to say, hey, this isn't going well. I think we need a process change. We need an update. So that's really important for us to hear so we can serve the hospital better, serve our internal team better. Aftercare, when they come into keeping our team motivated and focused on our mission, it's when they connect those donor families with our grief support, when they connect families, donor families, and recipient families. They do an amazing job of sending that to me so I can distribute it to our liaisons in the hospital to share with hospital staff. They share it with our organ team so they can feel uplifted of what the work they're doing and look how great this is turning out for these two families. So it's also a huge team effort in order to keep our team motivated, focused, and moving in the right direction with optimism, because we know social media has really bogged down the OPO world this past year. And so I think as leaders in our organization, we have to be the ones to keep the troops rallied and motivated and focused on our mission.
And, that kind of points to this other problem that you have sometimes, that there is an emotional weight to this work that comes with not just the day-to-day, but also just, the many, many challenges that you're facing, social media being a great example, New York Times articles or congressional hearings or things like that. So what do people underestimate about the emotional weight of this work?
I think people underestimate the internal conflicts that it causes OPO staff. OPO staff wake up every day and go to work with the intentions of helping recipients and assuring donor families that this is a good decision that they're making. And with that, it takes a toll on managing your own emotions. And if you're not managing those emotions internally as an OPO staff member, it's going to come out externally, maybe against the hospital, frustration with the hospital, and you're taking those emotions outward that you probably don't intend to do. And it's not malicious, it's not intentional, but it does come out. A hospital expresses frustration, and then as an OPO staff member, you're going to express your frustration, and then we run into conflict. And I think that ties in beautifully with the training that we've done at IDN with conflict resolution, emotional de-escalation for our staff members, so we can use those skills in the hospitals when there is, conflict and frustrations.
And let's talk a little bit about that, because I know you guys just went through this training and you actually had someone come in and talk to you about conflict resolution and how to put yourself in the right space to be able to deal with these things as they come up. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, our education department has invested in our company. All of our front-facing hospital staff have been required to participate in this training. David Hunsaker, he is with Indiana School of Business, and he has been such a great influence for our organization. Came in and did a one-day training, and then we have some half-day trainings built in here in a few weeks, just to give our staff the skill set to manage their own emotions and also to manage difficult conversations that they may have with hospital staff. And it has been instrumental. And the follow-up that he has provided with, okay, I taught you these skills, how have you used them so far? And let's talk about that. We just had that training last week. So everywhere from managing your own emotions to de-escalating their emotions when an external partner is frustrated or has concerns, phone and email strategies of how to communicate well so there's understanding, and then when there is conflict, how to resolve those.
So walk me through how you would use some of these skills. So let's say that you have a problem in a hospital where maybe there is a doctor or nurse or an APRN that really has a problem with something that's going on. It might be a particular that case, or it just might be a long-held, concern that they have. So when you sense that that kind of conflict is arising, and it might get in the way of the success of the donation case, what are some ways that you evaluate that situation and try to look for ways to de-escalate?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is check yourself. He really emphasized check your own emotions, because if you're going to bring your emotions into this and let them dictate this conversation, it's not going to go well. So he really emphasized managing your own emotions first before you can address someone else's emotions. So check yourself, focus on your body, slow your breathing down, name, internally name that emotion you're feeling. And being able to reappraise the situation of, okay, is this a rational emotion that I'm having, or is this irrational because, we're just all caught up in emotion. So being able to slow yourself down, your own response, is the first and foremost key. And then we can help de-escalate their emotions when there's emotions at the table. So listening, let that person listen or express what they're feeling, and just listen to their concerns. That's a lot of conflict when someone's not feeling heard. So that's the first and foremost important thing that they emphasized in this training. And then showing empathy. We are all humans, which is why we're feeling these emotions. So being able to say, I hear what you're saying, and I hear that this is really hard for you. You've cared for this patient the last 4 days. You've cared for their family. I hear you that this is really difficult. Don't say I understand what you're going through, because you're not their nurse. You're not their provider. So just showing that empathy of the position that they are in right now with their family or with their patient. Using the power of apologies of, I am so sorry that you have to experience this. I am sorry this is difficult for you. So those are just some of the tactics that we're emphasizing with our staff when we want to de-escalate the conflict, if there is.
And one piece of feedback that I've heard from frontline staff, and this might be reflective of the fact that they haven't really been trained that well in these kind of skills, but they'll say, that's all great, but when you're in the moment, you're not thinking that way. You're not able to pull someone aside and say, let's talk about your feelings. You're thinking about the fact that I have a limited amount of time to get this case done. This patient might become unsuitable for donation or might pass away before we're able to even get them through the process because this other person's being a barrier. And they'll say, I can't put myself in that position to de-escalate things because they're preventing me from doing my job. So when you're noticing that you're in a situation like that, what are some of the skills that you guys learned from this that might help you get through that?
Yeah. I think being able to answer the why, right? So we need to focus on issues and move towards what's the interest here. What's the best interest of the patient, the family, the hospital, the OPO? And so being able to, in that moment, set our emotions aside, because let's be real, not everybody has the skill set or the soft skills to navigate difficult conversations. Not everybody has or are comfortable allowing people to express their feelings. So let's break it down to moving from what's the issue here to what's the best interest here for everyone involved. So asking the why questions, providing the why when we have requests as an OPO for the hospital, and then show genuine understanding, even if that's just like reflective listening. So I hear what you're saying is you don't have time to go do brain death testing, but can I tell you why we are requesting the brain death testing to occur sooner rather than later? Can we set up a time that it is convenient for you to do brain death testing? So I think just giving the why behind the request that the OPO has can really de-escalate a lot of frustrations between teams and have better partnership.
I totally agree. And, it's kind of been my belief from the many, many interviews we've done over the years that a lot of times the people in the hospital are not trying to be barriers. They
Right.
might become barriers because they want to be heard, or because they feel that their concerns are not being regarded, and they feel like they have to stick up for themselves and for their patients in order to make sure the OPO understands their point of view. But I don't think that they often are trying to be adversarial. I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to do right by their patients. And putting yourself in that position is hard when you want something that's very different from what they're willing to provide. And yet, if you can get them to express that, then there's an opportunity to maybe open up a conversation that couldn't have been had before. So one of the things that we do run into sometimes, though, is there are folks that legitimately are barriers. They are not on board with donation. They might, might be someone who is very ethically concerned about it, or who has had so many bad experiences, maybe not even with your OPO, but maybe with another OPO,
Yeah.
that they're going to be a barrier. How do you work around those folks that are just dead set on preventing donation from happening?
Oh my gosh, that's a really tough question, right? Because I think just first of all, asking them, what's your experience that you've had with OPO before? Can you tell me, and I know we don't have time to sit down on the couch and have a session. However, but just asking that provider or that nurse, whoever that resistance is coming from, asking them, what's your experience in the past? And I think the encouragement of, well, I hear that probably was a really difficult situation that you were put in, but I'm going to ask that we are able to move forward. I want to be able to explain to you everything that we're doing, and I want to explain the why. So you don't feel like you have that, you're not going to have that experience again. I want to provide safety for you in this next case that we're about to start, to show you that we are invested in not only our donor family, but also your experience as well.
And every time you share one of these tools, I'm just taken aback by how much empathy is required. And it's hard sometimes to look at really seasoned doctors or nurses with that level of empathy, because they sometimes come off as being very uninterested in hearing your side of things, or your feelings. They want you to do what they want you to do. So if you're in a situation where you're struggling to find that empathetic connection, are there any tools that you learned from the training for that?
It all goes back to listen. Allow them to talk. Allow them to tell their story. They just want you to acknowledge they're upset. If that's the biggest takeaway, acknowledge that they have feelings. That's the huge takeaway. And, don't try to fix those feelings, because now's not the time to fix it when they're in the heat of the moment. We're not going to fix it, but keep showing up ready to listen. Keep showing up to show that you hear them. But you're not going to be able to fix it in the heat of the moment. But over time, showing up is going to show them some safety of, oh, this person does care. They do have best interest in play, because they keep showing up and they keep allowing me to talk to them, and they keep allowing to be heard. So I think the keep showing up, don't try to fix it in the heat of the moment, and just listen. Absolutely.
I think what you just said there is so insightful, Erin, that the time to fix the feelings is not necessarily when you are having that discussion. It might be a different time where you have more ability to go into things, but the time right there is to hear the feelings and to let them be expressed, and to try to figure out how they can stop being a barrier to what needs to be done, so that then you can circle back with them later. And that's one of the things
That's
that I think
huge.
is so difficult, right? Like, you want to fix things in the moment. You want everybody to be on your side. And you want them to believe that this is just as important as you do, but maybe that's not the right time to do that. So how do you just table that so that they don't feel like they're being patronized, but they're still willing to talk later?
I'm glad you asked that, because
Hmm.
we are really doing a big push with our hospital liaisons right now for follow up. Follow up is so, so important. Even if there were a lot of barriers and frustrations with a case, the importance of going back to that staff afterwards and saying, I know that was really difficult for everybody involved. I know that there were some frustrations. The importance of acknowledging that they had feelings and that it was difficult, even at just a week later, showing hospital staff that you didn't forget how hard that was, but we worked through it, and acknowledging the tough work, the resources, the time, the feelings that went into the work they did last week is so valuable. and appreciated by hospital staff. It really goes a long way when the liaison goes to hospital staff and says, hey, thanks so much for your work last week on that donor case. We know it was really, really difficult. And we're sorry that it was difficult, but we want to thank you for your efforts that you put into that. And the face-to-face follow-up, I think, goes so far than an email of, hey, thanks, look at what this donor was able to donate and the impact that they had on lives of recipients. We're finding that hospital staff don't read their email much, and donor follow-up is kind of going by the wayside. So we're really pushing for the face-to-face interactions for, donor follow-up, service recovery. It goes a long way when you address and communicate in person how you want to move forward and fix things for future cases rather than an email. Just so you know, we're looking into this, and that's it. So face-to-face human interaction. I know we're in a world of texting and emailing dictating all of our communications, but we are really pushing our liaisons for face-to-face to resolve things.
Yeah, and I always tell my team, if you can follow up in person, that's the way you should do it. If you have to rely on text or email, apologize that you have to rely on that, and still look for that opportunity to go and talk to the person personally, or even say, I'd love to follow up with you personally just to say how much we thank you, because it shows that you have a regard for them as a person, and they're not just part of an automated process. And I've seen this happen so much in the OPO world where follow-up and feedback after cases are automated, and it's great because it saves a lot of time. But as you said, they're not reading it, and so they don't feel like they're getting it. But if you take the time to just take 2 minutes with them after a case and say, hey, here's what we accomplished, here's how you were instrumental in helping with this role, and thank you, it comes back as being like, wow, they thought about me as a person, and they built a relationship with me.
Yeah. And then going back to the training that all of our front-facing hospital teams that are required to take, the one thing and the few minutes that he spent on it was phone and email communications and how to make them more effective. And I think, he really pressed that face-to-face has to be a priority. And if you don't do face-to-face and have to settle on a text message or an email, that's okay. But there's ways to put emotions into that. There's ways to add emotion to the call or the text by just acknowledging one. Hey, I know that was really emotionally exhausting for you today. Please know that next week I want you and I to follow up in person. I want to stop by and chat with you about that. So it's really important, that balance of, if you can't be face-to-face, acknowledging the emotion that happened, and then following up and setting up a time to be face-to-face, acknowledging that.
I love that. And even just making the offer a lot of times helps people to think, oh, wow, they really do care about me as a person. And that's what it all comes back to. And, I often try to remind folks, because I deal with doctors a lot in the work that we do at RPG, that they may come off as not caring. They may come off as not being interesting, because in the moment, they have to detach themselves from emotion.
Yes.
They have to stand there, and they have to have all the answers, and they have to be able to think about all their patients at the same time, equally important. And that makes them sometimes seem a little standoffish. But the reality is, there are very few people in the world who don't care about things. Most of us do have some feeling and emotion in what we're doing. And doctors and nurses and APRNs, they're no different. They care. It's just they might care in a way that isn't always visible or isn't always easy to understand. But when you take the time to connect with them and hear how much they care, you often find that they care a lot more than they gave off at the time.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you a little bit about this concern that sometimes we have, where there's a disconnect between what the OPO is trying to accomplish and what the folks in the hospital are trying to accomplish. So in the critical care units or the ICUs or the EDs, they're trying to save patients. They're trying to make sure that they are getting them out the door alive. And when an OPO is stepping in, it's a very different context. It's a situation where the patient is going to pass away, and donation is coming into question because of that. But it's difficult, because they're losing that patient. They're having to shift gears and think about something completely different. They're having to maybe benefit people that they're never going to see or hear from in the recipients. So how do you bridge that disconnect? Because that is a pretty serious source of conflict in some hospitals.
Yeah, it's a hot topic, especially now. Our DCD is a no age limit, right? And so
Hmm.
a common scenario is, why are you pursuing this case? Like it's an elderly patient, or their medical history has a lot to it, and is this patient even eligible? And I can't believe you guys are doing this. Or we'll get the statement of, so you're going to OR for one organ, a liver that you may not even be able to transplant on. So I think our response to that is, please understand that you guys do everything in your power to save a patient so they can walk out of this ICU, right? And we respect that wholeheartedly. But once that family makes an end of life decision and decides to discontinue medical therapies, we want to do everything we can to save a recipient. And that is our primary goal once that end of life decision has been decided. We will not entertain that idea of saving recipients, until that end of life decision has been made. So, helping hospitals understand that we have the same mission, believe it or not, saving lives, right? However, we will not entertain the life saving mission until the family has made that end of life decision. And sometimes that really puts that in perspective of, oh, we do everything we can. We exhaust all therapy measures to save a life. That makes sense that if there's one small chance that that liver is going to be able to save someone, you guys are going to put that energy into that. We get it. So we really try to put that in perspective.
I think that's so important. And, even in your role as an OPO, your role is to serve the donor and the family of the donor who want that opportunity to save someone's life to be on the table. They signed up for it, they've indicated it, or the family has given consent for it and authorized it. And so the purpose behind what you're doing is not that you're just looking for, oh, well, we're giving up on the patient, let's try to turn something good out of bad. It is, no, this is a direction that they have given. This is part of their last will on earth, what they want to accomplish with their life. And I think when you're able to articulate that way and help them to understand the seriousness of it, but also the invisible thread that ties between here's what their intention was and here's the life that we're going to save that you might never see. When I hear doctors and nurses and APRNs really get that, they get it in a way that is deep and meaningful, and they want to see that happen. But how do you get them to understand that? How do you get them to really see and feel that invisible line between the donor and the recipient?
Yeah, that is a really great question, especially as we're nearing into Donate Life Month. I
Hmm.
think it's important to acknowledge Donate Life Month in the hospital setting. So, rounding, I know one of our facilities has plans to round with a donor family and a recipient. Let's bring those two together, and we're going to round as a group to show them that their efforts really do matter, even though they don't get to see that outcome. As much as we can, we want to show hospitals connect to purpose stories to show them their labors of love and the impact that it takes for a donation to happen and the outcomes. We are very intentional with our donor councils to start off our donor councils with a wow moment. So we like to throw a number up on the screen and say, do you know what this number represents? 82 or 84 or whatever. And then kind of get the guess. And then we're like, no, that's how many gifts of tissue donation one person can give. And then it's like, oh, wow, right? So we start the donor councils off with a wow moment. And then we always like to end our donor council with a connect to purpose. So they leave feeling inspired by, okay, this work that we just did in this last hour of donor council has such an important impact, and this is why we do it. So that is one way that we really like to inspire hospitals to understand the connection of the work they do for the recipients. Some other ideas, a couple of our hospitals are, our transplant hospital just last spring added a Donate Life memorial in their lobby. They not only do they do transplants, they do donation, and so the family gets a little cup of beads that represents a donor, and they get to pour these beads in the letters. They're like ceramic little plexiglass letters that spell out Donate Life. And so the white beads represent one of donor families, right? So they get to put these beads in the letters. And then they are also giving out beads to heart recipients, to kidney recipients, to living donors. And all these colors of beads represent something different as far as related to transplant or donation. And people pour their beads into this Donate Life memorial that's in the lobby for everyone to see. So we're trying to make it more public that, yes, donation is so sad and causes a lot of grief. It's not the donation that causes the grief. It's the death, the loss of the individual. So making that more public, but also the impact of the recipients and including the recipients in on that journey is really important for publicity. And not to show off, hey, look what we did, but to show the impact of the work from the hospital, the families, and being able to make that come to one has been really awesome to see with our organization and our Donate Life Indiana, who's the one that, sponsored that at the Transplant Center.
I absolutely love that idea. I think the visual is really helpful for those who, especially if they're having trouble feeling it in the moment, being able to see it and be presented with it that way makes a big difference. And, we've heard similar feedback about honor walks, right? So honor walks were one of those things that when they came up, they sounded like a really cool idea, but it's really been evidenced in the research we've done and in other places that have seen that they're not just a good idea, they're a fantastic idea because they really bridge the gap between we have this donation happening in our hospital and we need to honor this person who is being this donor hero, and we need to honor their family. And one of the interesting things that I keep hearing in the research is the hospital staff and the doctors will say, we feel honored. We feel honored. I love that because that means that they're not just connecting to what's happening with the donor and the donor family, but they themselves are connecting to the donation program. So when you have those visuals and when you have those displays that connect people beyond just the intellectual knowledge of what's going on, it makes a huge difference in terms of how they feel about donation.
Yeah, it really does. And we're really encouraging our donor councils to actually come and have their donor council meeting at our building. We want them to see the donor memorial tree. We want them to see our clinical space so they know that we are an established facility. We have an ICU environment that we care for these donors at. So inviting our donor councils to our building is really important. And then we actually are hosting our Amplify event, which in years past, it was one day, 400 attendees. They come and hear some inspiring stories, get some CEs from some education that we provide by different speakers. And it was just one day. We needed to change it up. So this year we're having 4 separate events and we're tailoring it to hospital groups. Last week we just had about 49 hospital representatives nursing leadership. So the agenda was very focused towards leadership in the hospitals for the nurses. And we did different educations. How do we care for our families in the approach specifically? Why is DCD growing immensely for donation? Just that topic for our nursing leaders. More intimate environment to ask questions, have feedback, which is why we kept it at a small number for attendance. They were invites only, right? So, hey, we want your leadership specifically. Come to this event. So that was last week. It was really, really successful. We got great feedback. We showed them our donor memorial. We showed them our donor care unit. We showed them where, tissue recovery takes place and that we have real operating rooms and we're able to do at our donor care unit and how we support our families that visit our donor care unit. And that really helped this nursing leadership group put the pieces together, So we transfer our brain dead patients. And so then it was always been a mystery of like, where are you taking our patients? Where are they going after you leave here? So we got some really great feedback last week from our nursing leadership. Through the years, we're having another one in June, and it's specifically going to be invitations for respiratory therapists so that they can come and experience it. We can have good conversations in a smaller group from representatives from across the state at different hospitals. Then we're going to do another one in August that's tailored to hospital partners, so your social workers, your chaplains, just donor champions that are working on the units. Then again, we're doing in November a nursing edition again to get those bedside nurses to our facility so they can see the care that we provide families when the donors leave their units. So we're really excited about that as well, being able to tailor our education rather than one big mass day of education.
I love it. And when you get a cohort of people together that have a similar role, they get to network and talk to each other too, and to kind of compare notes on the experiences that they have. So I think that's fantastic. Well,
Yeah, we were finding that the event was bringing in only RTs because RTs need CEs in person in Indiana. And so we're like, we need the people that are decision makers. We need the people that really need to see that their efforts are growing and their efforts are valued. So that's why we wanted to tailor it to smaller groups. And I think it's really going to benefit us this year.
well, I'm so impressed that you can just rattle off all these things you are doing just off the top of your head because you guys have so many great things going on. But I imagine that takes an enormous amount of coordination and work behind the scenes to make happen. And, you know, a lot of times in leadership at OPOs, folks, they're constantly trying to do things, but they get burned out because they have to balance so many different things at once. So how do you and your team and your leaders that you're working with in Indiana try to work to balance things so you're not getting burned out and you can have that passion and enthusiasm that you're talking about?
Well, I think a shout out to our marketing team and our communications team. Our Marcom people are fantastic in event planning. So they know the basics like the back of their hand of what needs to happen to make a great event. But I think we all take turns, right, on our events as far as how much energy you're putting into the event. So for this Amplify event, you know, we wanted a nurse's brain, and let's bring in some of our IDN staff that have that nursing focus ingrained in them to help plan that agenda. When we do our RT event, we want to bring in some of our RTs that are employed at IDN to help bring in their energy and their thoughts. And when we do our hospital partners one, we're going to bring in family services and some of our social workers and our connections to chaplains and what do they want to hear. So I think that's what's beautiful about an OPO organization is we have so many different skill sets from nurses to RTs to we have staff that used to be teachers, right? And so they have that brain of how to educate really well and being able to bring in all the different skill sets to make these events successful is absolutely critical.
That's fantastic. And, you know, I'm sure there's some leaders listening to this show and they're hopefully taking a lot of notes because you had a lot of great things to share. But when leaders are feeling burned out or when they're feeling like they have just way too many things that they're trying to do, what would you encourage them to focus on in order to find that spark or that passion that can keep them going in the work they're doing?
Oh my gosh, pull up our Connect to Purpose page. When you hear those donor family stories and those recipient stories and the impact that it makes, that is something that will recenter you for sure. I think as leaders, we have to rely on each other and be okay saying, I'm exhausted. You know, being okay with one another and having that almost that psychological safety with one another when you are exhausted. And you need your partners to say, hey, look at, help your partners reflect on what they have done and maybe why they're exhausted, right? And being able to let them help them reflect on all the amazing work that they've done, but also just validate that this work is exhausting. It is very emotionally draining, it is demanding, and what they're feeling is okay and understandable because we've all been there. And then being able to move into, hey, look at this great story. Remember when you were a part of this? Or look at your team. They helped make this happen. And I really stress the importance for our team anyways, work-life balance. When you are off, you need to be off. You need to be unavailable to recharge your battery, you know. And so it's just a combination of things as far as preventing burnout. But I think being able to admit when you're burned out and being able to have someone help you reflect on this is why you're feeling tired is really important to have that key person that can help you do that.
That's fantastic advice. And, you know, I know a lot of folks that are in the organ procurement world, they have these kind of passionate triggers. So you mentioned, you know, things like centering yourself back on the donor family and connecting to the purpose of what you're doing. So what are some things that, for you personally, Erin, light a fire for you? Or what are some things that frustrate you and make you passionate in a different way about what you're doing?
Oh, gosh, that's a big question. So what makes me passionate? Moving into this management role has really provided me the opportunity to say, okay, I've done direct donor care. I have cared for families at their worst moments. I've cared for them on their road to healing after donation. And being able to be in this manager role and helping teach our organization and our liaisons and our forensic outreach coordinators how to communicate, that brings me fire. Like, I love being able to teach soft skills for our teams to use. You know, some people love data. I will tell you right now, looking at our metrics and our data does not bring me energy at all. But it's a part of the job that we just have to do. But being able to teach people and help people put perspective of why there's feelings, I absolutely love doing that, and that's what gives me energy.
Is there anything that keeps you hopeful when the work feels heavy?
You know, when I'm able to acknowledge that the work feels heavy, that puts me, that kind of gives me a perspective for myself that I'm human. And because sometimes, like we've already talked about, you just get in the role of doing day after day things. But I have really decided or learned and matured that when the work feels heavy, it means I'm human. It's not that I'm burned out. It's not that I'm not good at my job or we're not doing good things. It's we're human, and that's an indication that I need to reach out to my fellow managers and say, hey guys, it's feeling heavy for me. And they help me give perspective because I'm always giving perspective to my team. And so being able to have a leadership team that you can stand next to and have validated emotions is really important. But I think something else that I think our organization does really well is acknowledges that the work is really heavy, but they do encourage us to be leaders together and not separately. Like, that's their job, that's my job. I don't need to know what's going on in their department because I'm not a part of that. Our leadership does a really good job of saying, hey guys, collaborate. Hey guys, let's talk. Hey guys, let's make sure we're all on the same page with these big rollouts that we're doing. Even to the point of some leadership retreats to where we can get away from the office and do brainstorming together rather than in separate departments. So I really enjoy that our leadership takes that seriously and makes that a priority.
I'm just hearing from you over and over how collaborative you all are, both with your internal team, with the folks that you're working with externally, that you're not deciding that one person knows best, but you're allowing everyone to speak up and have a voice. And I think carrying the load together does make it easier. You know, what is that old saying about many hands make light work? You know, but the idea that we're all working together, we can make it easier for a boat to function. You know, any of those kinds of analogies that you use. The idea being that if you're trying to do it by yourself as a leader, or if you're trying to really have a top-down approach, the work gets heavy because you're taking so much on your shoulders. But when you're allowing other people to work with you and to be a part of that and to contribute their experience, then it helps the workload to lighten a little bit so that you can focus on the things you need to get done, but also you can feel like you're not being crushed by all of the things that come with it.
Well, I think to speak to that, I feel like we do a very good job of when we are going into a meeting and we know there's going to be some difficult conversations around clinical eligibility or approach styles for resistant first-person authorized cases. Our different teams are very much so at the ready of, you need me to represent that at your meeting? Yep, I'll be there. You know, we know this physician was frustrated with eligibility. Then our clinical manager, she knows that, she's going to make that a priority to come with to that meeting. So I think that's really helpful, keeping your door open to the organization. So you're not, as a hospital liaison, going to a meeting and speaking about clinical eligibility when you don't, that's out of your realm, right? So having the backup ready to speak to their role is super important, and so much. I think we do that really well at IDN.
That's fantastic. Well, this has been a great interview. I've learned so much from talking with you, and you have so many awesome things to share. But as we wrap up, what are your top takeaways for anyone listening, whether they're new to the field or they've been in it for decades?
be human. It's okay to have feelings, and I think as medical providers that they get in the groove of clinical focus, and what can I fix? I have to be able to fix it, and sometimes the emotions really try to get pushed back to the back burner. You're around death every single day. How do you not process that? So being able to provide each other with some psychological safety, I think, is a absolute must in the OPO world, and being able to allow these passionate clinical teams have their emotions in an appropriate time is crucial. Something else, what would be another takeaway for a new person into the OPO world would be there is not a single day that will be alike. every day, brace yourself, because every day is going to be different. There's going to be different conversations. There's going to be different barriers. And being able to pivot is crucial in the OPO world. But the passion that you have to save lives but also care for people has to be your focus. The passion to care for a donor family and acknowledge the decision that donor made is the driving force for OPOs to be successful, and to have the focus of people's decisions.
Well, Erin, thank you so much for being a part of OPO Insights. I have felt like I've just learned so much, and if people want to get in touch with you, of course, your information is in the show notes so that they can do that. Thanks so much for being on.
Thank you so much for having me. What you're doing for the OPO world is fantastic work, and I hope everyone is familiar with your services and utilizes your team. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Wow, what a pleasure to have that discussion and just to hear all of these positive and uplifting ideas that Erin and her team have at Indiana Donor Network. And I have to say, I mentioned this in the interview, but I have been to this organization and they have always impressed me. They have some amazing people. They are so dedicated to not just making their mission front and center in their words, but visually. And this tree that they have in their lobby, if you ever get a chance to go and visit their facility, you'll see what I mean. And it is really incredible, just the way that it centers them on the work that they're doing. So I want to say thank you to Erin for being on. It was a pleasure. And actually, we intentionally waited until she had gone through this conflict resolution training to have her on the show because she wanted to be able to talk about it. And I am so glad that she could. But if you want to get in touch with Erin, of course, her information is in the show notes. And we, again, are so appreciative to her for being on. If you would like to be on OPO Insights, or if you have a colleague who you would like to be on, please get in touch with us. You can go to opoinsights.substack.com and sign up for our newsletter, get every one of these episodes and my weekly newsletter in your mailbox. I also want to mention we have our Best Practices Summit coming up this year. And Best Practices Summit is something we do for free for the OPO community. We have virtual sessions as well as our in-person sessions. And you can go to bestpractices.researchplan.com, and that's in the show notes as well, and sign up to participate in those. It doesn't cost you anything other than the cost of getting there and maybe getting a hotel room. But there's an aftercare and family services track in October, and there's a hospital development track in November. We'd love to have you there. And space is limited. Once we hit 75 people, we have no more room. So please come. Please bring some of your colleagues. And if you have any questions about that, please do let me know. But in the meantime, thank you for listening to OPO Insights. I hope you have gotten so much out of these discussions, and we'll see you again next week.